Welcome, everybody. We are so excited to reveal our latest project from Texas Housers. Today, we're joined by Erin Hahn, who is a research analyst from San Antonio on the research team. And Erin, I would love for you to sort of describe what we're going to talk about today, which is the Bexar County Eviction Dashboard. So, welcome. And what is the Bexar County Eviction Dashboard, and what is its purpose?
Thanks, Michael. Happy to be here. Let me share my screen. So this is the Bexar County Eviction Case Dashboard. It tracks eviction filings in Bexar County between the years of 2018 through 2022. So as you can see here, evictions were rising in the years prior to the pandemic. They drastically dropped during the pandemic years of 2020 and 2021 as a result of pandemic-era protections, and they skyrocketed back. And so we think it's very important to keep an eye on how eviction rates are rising in Bexar County with the disappearance of protections that were intact during the pandemic, and to make sure that the public and the government officials are aware of what's happening in terms of the state of evictions in Bexar County.
Now, we've spent a lot of time tracking evictions all over the state. Certainly, since the start of the pandemic, it's been a major focus for the research team. But how did this particular project come about? And, what was Texas Housers' intention in creating this dashboard?
So there are other online tools that track evictions in other Texas cities. January Advisors has a tool that tracks evictions in Harris County. The Child Poverty Action Lab has a similar tool that tracks evictions into the Dallas area. BOSTA collects eviction records in Travis County. And so we wanted to create a similar tool for tracking eviction filings in the San Antonio area. So we requested eviction records from the Bexar County Justice of the Peace offices and analyzed them alongside demographic data from the census. So now with this dashboard, we have an understanding of where in Bexar County evictions are being filed, who evictions are impacting, and a little bit of a historical context to show that this issue is getting worse.
Mm-hmm. So if we're sort of tracking to show that it's getting worse, can you talk about some of the details of the findings from the dashboard?
Sure. So, like in Texas' other urban areas, like I mentioned before, eviction filings in Bexar County were rising prior to the pandemic. They dropped and they've been skyrocketing since. But we also found that from analyzing eviction records alongside information from the census, demographic and income data from the census, that eviction filings are more prevalent in low-income neighborhoods of color in Bexar County. So on this map right here, we map out an eviction rate at the census tract level. And then in the text that will follow the dashboard on our website, we dive a little bit more into the characteristics of these neighborhoods that have a higher concentration of evictions. And we tend to see that evictions are concentrating in low-income neighborhoods of color and are largely absent from wealthier and whiter areas in the county. We also see that some apartment complexes, marked here on the map with these red dot symbols, are filing evictions in huge amounts in 2022. Some complexes filed eviction cases on more than a third of their renter population in 2022. So this layer of the map right here pulls out the top 30 evicting properties in 2022. You can select a property from the list, and the map will zoom in and provide a little bit more information about the complex, like its number of units and the number of evictions that were filed in 2022, so we can calculate an eviction rate right here. And from looking at case disposition data, or the outcome of the case as ruled by the judge, we found that cases in 2022 were significantly more likely to be ruled in favor of the landlord. About 76% of all eviction cases in 2022 were ruled in favor of the landlord. And so in all, the data shows that eviction filings are becoming more and more prevalent in Bexar County. And because of the absence of renter protections in our city and our state, judges are frequently ruling in favor of the landlord and displacing tenants from their homes at a very high rate.
This is some really concerning data. Some properties you're suggesting that a third of the residents at properties are receiving evictions at these high evicting properties, um, rates going up in Bexar County. Uh, do you have any reason why evictions are prevalent in Bexar County?
Well, because of rising rents and the lack of affordable housing in San Antonio, low-income families compete for a very low, limited supply of affordable housing units, and sometimes they end up accepting a unit that requires them to devote a larger portion of their monthly income to the rent, to paying the rent than they would prefer. 80% of extremely low-income households in Bexar County are severely housing cost burdened, meaning that they spend more than half of their income on rent and utilities. So it can be extremely difficult for a low-income renter living paycheck to paycheck to um, pay rent on time if an unexpected emergency arises, like an unexpected medical bill. And Texas law offers very little protection for renters against eviction. A landlord can file an eviction just 3 days after the monthly rent is due, which gives low-income renters very little time to find alternative sources of income to pay the rent on time after an emergency, and avoid eviction. And so the lack of affordable housing and that just the sheer absence of renter protections make low-income renter households highly susceptible to eviction and its lasting negative impacts.
In your estimation, is this unique to Bexar County, or can this be found in similar areas in Texas?
Generally, rising eviction rates is not unique to Bexar County. We're seeing rising evictions in most of the major cities in Texas. Across Texas during the pandemic, like I mentioned, for Bexar County, evictions tended to drop drastically because rental assistance and eviction moratoria kept renters stably housed. But with the expiration of these protections in 2022 or late 2021, um, eviction rates have skyrocketed back. Low-income people are still feeling the financial impact of the pandemic, but they have no protections against evictions. So we are seeing rising eviction rates in Bexar County and the other major urban areas in Texas.
You know, evictions, I think people just uh, who aren't familiar with the eviction process may think that someone may be kicked out from their home, experience some instability, and maybe just move on to another home. But what are the real consequences of eviction that you have seen or that you've studied or come to know?
Evictions are harmful to renter households because they uproot families and children from the communities that they live in and work in and go to school in. They negatively impact housing stability and employment, the mental and physical health of families and children, the educational trajectory of children. They increase the risk of homelessness. And even an eviction filing on its own is super damaging to renters as well. Even if the case is ultimately dismissed, just having an eviction filing on a tenant's record follows them for years and makes it extremely difficult for the tenant to find housing in the future. So it's very important that we keep in check the rising eviction rates in Bexar County and make sure we're doing something about it.
Well, what can be done about evictions in Bexar County?
Well, evictions can be expected to continue to rise until significant investments into eviction prevention and affordable housing are made at the state and local level, although movement at the state level is slow. So we would urge localities, both Bexar County and City of San Antonio, to prioritize renter stability. Local policy solutions include expanding renter protections and programs that offer services to renters facing eviction. For example, San Antonio launched a pilot right to counsel in 2019, which was hugely successful in keeping low-income renters in their home, helping them avoid eviction by giving them access to representation in court. However, this only helped a small portion of the tenants who are facing eviction. So expanding programs like right to counsel, but also funding additional services like providing tenant-landlord mediation services, relocation services, and eviction diversion programs like rental assistance.
So the city and Bexar County have tried different things to sort of divert people away from eviction. whether that's obviously right to counsel or tenant mediation services. These are things that, and this is something that Texas Housers has emphasized over and over again, which is oftentimes a renter going into eviction court, it may be their first time. But the plaintiff, it's often they're a frequent participant in eviction court. So programs like these to sort of level the legal playing field are critically important, you would say, to make sure that people don't fall further into poverty or any sort of other negative health indicators?
Yes, exactly. In eviction court, the power balance is definitely tilted towards the landlord. Oftentimes, an apartment complex will have a very experienced eviction rep take over their eviction cases. They've been in eviction court many times before. They have experience with the eviction process. They understand it. But for most tenants, an eviction is their first time in a courtroom at all, and they face lots of barriers to understanding their rights and knowing what is required of them throughout the process. So just having access to a legal attorney can make a huge difference in allowing a tenant to have a fair trial, to present their case fairly and understand their rights, and ensure that justice is ensured.
Ultimately, what do you want viewers of the Bexar County Eviction Dashboard to take away from all of this data that you're presenting?
Well, before the release of this dashboard, there was a gap in terms of missing publicly available information when it comes to the state of evictions in Bexar County. But now we have the data to show that, like other urban areas in Texas, Bexar County is experiencing rising eviction rates as a result of the affordability crisis and the lack of renter protections. And the upward trend in evictions will continue until government officials take meaningful action to promote renter stability in Bexar County.
And lastly, can you tell the people how to reach you and also how to view the dashboard?
Sure, the dashboard is accessible by going to texashousers.org/Bexar County Evictions. And if anyone has any questions or comments or wants to hear more about the dashboard, you can reach out to me at Erin at texashousing.org. That's TEXASHOUSING.org.
All right. Thanks a lot, Erin.
Thanks, Michael.